They say you can tell a lot about a man by the way he treats his wife. But I learned early on that how a man treats his wife can sometimes have more to do with power than affection. I married Richard when I was 19. He was 58. My mother cried the day I brought home the ring, not out of sadness but joy. Relief even. Years of struggling to pay rent, scraping together grocery money, pretending pride wasn't just a cover for hunger, it all ended with one yes. Richard had money. Real money. Old money. The kind that didn't blink at private jets or antique vases that cost more than what most people earned in a year. He had connections in real estate and oil, and he had a look in his eye that told me he was used to getting what he wanted. He wanted me. Or more precisely, he wanted someone like me. Pretty, eager, young. I played the part. I always had. My mother taught me well, how to smile with your eyes, how to wear perfume like armor, how to dress like you belong somewhere you don't. Love, she said, was for people who could afford failure. We couldn't. So I got what I wanted. Designer shoes I used to only see in magazines. Car with seats that warmed before I even knew I was cold. Dresses that draped my body like silk had been invented for me alone. Bouquets of roses taller than I was. Vacations to villas I had to Google just to pronounce. But the thing about luxury is, it can be lonely, quiet, suffocating. Richard wasn't cruel. That's the thing. He never yelled, never raised a hand. But kindness? That was scarce too. He treated me like one of his properties, polished, owned, locked behind gates. I was a beautiful ornament, displayed at galas and dinners, expected to smile and speak only when spoken to. In private, his coldness lingered like the smell of his cologne, expensive, sharp, and always a few feet too far away. I learned not to ask questions. He didn't like them. Our house, well, our mansion, was too big. Rooms went unused. Echoes became company. The help was polite, distant, well-trained not to look at me too long. I started spending more time in the garden, pruning roses I didn't plant just to have something living near me. And then Liam came back. His son from his first marriage. 24. Older than me by 3 years. I still remember the first time I saw him. It was a Sunday. I was sitting by the pool, flipping through a catalog of chandeliers. The sun reflected off the water in long shimmers, and I was thinking about how quiet the house had been all morning when I heard the back gate open. He walked in like he belonged there. He did, technically. But he hadn't visited in over a year, Richard told me. Something about boarding schools and letting him grow up outside of the shadow of the estate. I hadn't thought much of it. Until that moment. He wasn't what I expected. Not a spoiled brat. Not a cold clone of his father. Liam was heat. Sunlight. Confident but not arrogant. Presence, not a performance. Cassie, right? He asked, and I blinked up at him from behind my sunglasses. Yes. And you must be Liam. He gave a crooked smile, one dimple deepening in his left cheek. Wasn't sure if you'd know who I was. I've seen photos, I said, lifting my glass. Though none of them did justice. He laughed, an easy sound that felt out of place in the marble and glass world I lived in. Caught me off guard. That day we spoke for only a few minutes. Nothing inappropriate. Weather. College. Car he drove. But something lingered in the air like the way a thunderstorm hums before it hits. The days that followed felt different. He didn't leave. Said he was taking time off to reset. Said he missed home. But he didn't talk much to his father. In fact, I noticed Liam watched Richard the same way I had learned to, guarded, careful, unreadable. And soon I realized he watched me too. Not in a leering way. No, Liam's gaze wasn't hungry. It was curious. Almost protective. As though he saw me. Not just the version of me Richard paraded around, but the girl beneath the silk. The one who had learned to smile through silence. The one who still remembered what it felt like to want something simply because it made you feel alive. One evening, I passed him in the hallway. My bare feet padded quietly on the marble floor, and I didn't expect anyone to be there. But Liam was, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching the rain through the floor-to-ceiling window. Couldn't sleep? I asked. He turned, surprised, but smiled. Same as you, I guess. Something in his eyes met mine then, like recognition. Like he knew why I couldn't sleep. I don't think this house was built for dreaming, I said, not even sure why I said it. He laughed softly. No. Just for hiding. That struck something in me. I looked at him, really looked. The way his shirt clung to his frame. The wet shimmer in his dark hair from the rain. The sadness, yes, sadness, that flickered behind his lashes before he blinked it away. We stood there for a beat too long. I should go, I whispered, suddenly aware of how close we were. You don't have to, he replied just as quietly. But I did. I walked away, my heart pounding too fast for someone who claimed to be content. I told myself it was just curiosity, the way two people stare into the same silence and wonder if the other hears it too. I didn't know yet how dangerous wonder could become. The thing about silence is that it doesn't just fill a space, it takes root in your bones. Teaches you to walk softer, breathe quieter, want less. In Richard's house, silence was sacred. Even music was rationed like electricity in a storm. Noise is for people who don't have control, he'd said once when I played a playlist in the bathroom. We don't need chaos. But that morning, the house was mine. Richard had left for a business trip in Dubai. 3 full days. I had rehearsed my freedom in my head the moment his car pulled out of the gate. Coffee where I wanted it, no heels, and most of all, music. Real music. Loud music. I padded barefoot into the main living room, pulled open the curtains until the sunlight spilled like honey across the cold marble floor. Then I opened Spotify and let the first chords of a band I loved, a sound too raw, too young for Richard's standards, pulse through the speakers like a heartbeat I hadn't heard in months. God, it felt good. I turned the volume up until the windows trembled. The rhythm took hold of me before I even realized it. First my fingers drumming against the countertop, then my hips swaying in slow figure eights as the beat crawled under my skin. I danced through the kitchen, into the living room, a silk robe draped over a satin nightgown I wore just for myself. Not for him. Not for anyone. Just because it felt like something I'd wear if I were free. My hands slid down the line of my waist, tracing the curve of my hip, my body moving in time with the music. I closed my eyes, tilted my head back, laughed, a breathless sound that startled even me. I hadn't heard my own laugh like that in ages. And that's when I heard it. The sound of the door clicking open. I froze mid-twirl, one hand still tangled in my hair, my robe slipping off one shoulder. My heart stopped. Liam stood just inside the foyer, the light behind him making him look more shadow than man. His duffel bag dangled from one shoulder, and his mouth hung open slightly. Wow, he said, his voice soft, breathless. I fumbled to grab the edge of my robe, my cheeks flooding with heat. Liam, what are you doing here? I thought you were. I didn't mean to scare you, he said quickly, holding up a hand, not stepping closer. Dad told me I could crash here for a few nights. I didn't know you'd be home. I live here, I replied, still breathless, trying to sound more annoyed than mortified. And I wasn't expecting anyone. Especially not today. He didn't say anything right away. His eyes, dark, steady, remained on mine. He wasn't leering, wasn't ogling me like I feared. But he had seen me. All of me. Not just the shape of my body, but something more intimate, my joy. My guard down. I've never heard music in this house before, he said after a moment, his voice gentler now. Not like that. I gave a tight, awkward laugh. Yeah, well, your dad would never allow it. He thinks it's childish. He would, Liam said with a dry smile. Silence fell again. But this time it wasn't the kind that suffocates, it was charged. Dense. Like something unspoken had just stepped into the room with us. I pulled my robe tighter, suddenly cold despite the sunshine. Liam set down his bag and stepped out of his shoes without taking his eyes off me. You dance like someone who used to dance all the time, he said, still quiet, like he was speaking to a version of me he remembered. I did, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. When I was younger. When music didn't feel like rebellion. I'm glad I saw it, he said, and I couldn't tell if he meant for that to slip out. I looked away, but something twisted in my chest, an ache I'd tried to ignore since the first time we spoke in the hallway. It was there again, pulling at me, making me feel warm and terrified. I shouldn't have done that, I muttered. It was stupid. Reckless. It wasn't, he replied, and I could feel him take a slow step toward me. It was you. The words struck deeper than I expected. There was no accusation in his tone. No flirtation. Just truth. I looked at him then. Really looked. The boyish softness that once clung to him had sharpened into a man's silhouette. But what caught me, what undid me, was the way he looked at me. Like I was someone worth seeing. Not a trophy. Not a mistake. Person. A woman. And it hit me all at once, the thing I hadn't allowed myself to admit. I wanted him to look at me that way again. I should go change, I said quickly, taking a step back, needing space to breathe. He didn't follow, but I felt his gaze linger like heat on my skin. Tassie, he said softly, and I stopped in the doorway. You looked happy. I hope you know that's allowed. His words followed me up the stairs, echoing louder than any song I had played. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed beneath crisp sheets in the coldest bed I'd ever known. The image of him standing there, eyes wide, caught somewhere between admiration and discovery, it stayed with me. 'Cause something had changed in that moment. And I was afraid of what it meant. Afraid of how my heart fluttered when I saw his smile. Afraid of how lonely I suddenly felt when I thought of him sleeping just down the hall. But most of all, I was afraid of the warmth blooming inside me. A warmth I hadn't felt in so long I had forgotten it could even exist. Was it wrong? Maybe. But it was real. And it was mine. I'd gotten used to the sound of nothing. It was the only song that played in Richard's house. The whisper of wind through open hallways, the quiet hum of hidden appliances, those were the only companions I had most days. And in that quiet, I created routines. Rituals. I left the bathroom door open when I showered because no one ever came upstairs. I played music in my head when I washed my hair. I let the steam curl against the mirrors and the tiles without worrying about anything but the time. That day was no different. The water poured over me, hot and heavy, washing away whatever traces of the night before lingered on my skin. My body still felt warm from the memory of dancing, the echo of Liam's voice telling me I looked happy. I didn't know what to make of the way his words had sunk beneath my skin. I didn't want to give them weight, but they settled in my chest like something permanent. The glass was fogged over and the door was half open, just enough to let the steam escape into the hallway. I didn't hear his footsteps. I only realized I wasn't alone when I opened my eyes and saw him. Liam. Standing in the doorway. Still. Silent. His eyes locked on me through the mist. My breath caught. I froze, water dripping down my neck between my shoulder blades over the curve of my waist. For a moment, neither of us moved. His eyes didn't dart away in shame or embarrassment. They didn't gawk or linger in places that made me feel small. No, they just stayed on mine. And in them, I saw something that made my knees tremble. Hunger, yes, but also reverence. Like he was seeing something sacred. Like he didn't want to look away because, somehow, this moment wasn't just about my body. It was about me. I don't know how long we stood like that, seconds maybe. But time slowed. The world hushed. And something shifted between us. Something irreversible. I was the first to break the gaze. I stepped back into the water, heart racing, lips parted like I was about to say his name but couldn't form the sound. By the time I turned off the faucet and wrapped the towel around me, the hallway was empty again. But the air still vibrated with something electric. My skin felt marked. I returned to my bedroom, shutting the door this time. My hands trembled as I moved to the dresser, pulling out the first thing I could find, a loose shirt, soft and worn, and slipped it over my still damp body. I wasn't sure what scared me more, that he had seen me or that I had wanted him to. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to steady my breathing. And then the door creaked open. I didn't move. Liam stepped in, quiet, hesitant, like he wasn't sure whether he should be there. His hair was damp from a recent shower, and he wore a plain black t-shirt and jeans that clung to him like they were part of his skin. Our eyes met again. Neither of us spoke. He crossed the room slowly, as if afraid that one wrong move would shatter whatever fragile thread connected us. But I didn't stop him. I couldn't. I should have. But I didn't. When he stood in front of me, I looked up and saw the conflict in his eyes, the fear, the disbelief, the desire held tight beneath restraint. I didn't mean to, he started. I know, I said, my voice barely audible. And that's when everything blurred. I reached for him. Or maybe he reached for me. I don't remember. I just know that one moment we were looking at each other like people who had lived 1,000 lives apart, and in the next we were falling into something that felt terrifyingly natural. There was no rush, no desperation, just closeness, warmth, breath and skin, and the way his hand found mine first, like he needed permission to fall too. When his lips touched mine, it wasn't explosive, it was quiet, reverent. A question I didn't answer with words, but with the way I leaned in. Kiss deepened, and everything else slipped away. The weight of Richard's name, the echo of every rule I had followed to survive, the fear of doing something unforgivable. All of it vanished beneath the feeling of being seen. Wanted. Loved, maybe, if love could happen in a single collision of two souls that had been quietly aching for the same thing. Afterward, we lay in the silence we'd broken together. The morning sun had crept across the bed, turning his hair to gold and my shame into something that looked suspiciously like peace. Liam propped himself up on one elbow, his fingers tracing the line of my arm. "We can't pretend this didn't happen," he said, not as a warning but a truth. "I'm not pretending," I whispered. He leaned down, brushed his lips against my temple. "I didn't mean to fall in love with you." And there it was. The thing I was most afraid of. The warmth I had felt blooming in secret places was no longer hiding. It was there in his voice, in my chest, in the way I suddenly wanted more than stolen moments. I turned to face him, my heart in my throat. Neither did I. We didn't speak for a long time after that. But the silence was different now. Not oppressive. Not hollow. It was the kind of silence that held two people inside it, hearts beating in rhythm, afraid of the world outside the door but unwilling to let go of what they had found. Whatever came next, we both knew there was no going back. We had stepped across a line. And in doing so, we had finally found something worth risking everything for. It was beautiful. Like a dream I was afraid to touch in case it vanished. Every stolen moment with Liam, every glance across the hallway, every brush of fingers when no one was looking, every whispered confession in the quiet hours of the night, felt like the chapters of a fairy tale no one had written yet. Ours was a love wrapped in impossibility, and maybe that was what made it so achingly perfect. But love, real love, always asks for sacrifice. And ours would ask for more than I knew how to give. When Richard returned, the house shifted. Like it knew who its master was. The light dimmed, the silence returned. And Liam and I went still, like deer frozen beneath a hunter's gaze. We tried to mask it, our joy, our secret, our warmth, but Richard was too shrewd, too controlling not to notice. Started with the way his eyes followed us when we passed each other in the halls. Then came the questions, subtle and sharp. "Have you two been spending a lot of time together, and did I miss something?" His voice was always calm, but it had that edge to it, the kind that said he already knew. Then came the night it all cracked wide open. We were at dinner. Just the three of us. Richard was swirling his wineglass, watching me too closely, and I could feel the weight of Liam's silence across the table. I didn't dare look at him. "You've seemed different lately," Richard said to me, tapping the rim of his glass. "Brighter. As if something's awakened." I smiled too tightly. "Maybe I'm just getting used to the weather." He laughed once without warmth. "Or maybe it's something else." Then he turned to Liam. "What do you think, son? Is my wife glowing?" Liam tensed. I saw it. The way his jaw clenched. The way he pushed his chair back a little too forcefully. "I think you should talk to her with a little more respect," he said quietly. The air froze. Richard leaned forward. "Excuse me." I placed my hand on the table, trying to steady the shaking in my fingers. "Please don't." But it was too late. "What did you do?" Richard said, his voice suddenly cold, his mask slipping. "Tell me, Cassie. How far did you fall?" I stood up. "Enough." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something unhinge in his eyes. "I gave you everything," he hissed. "And you repay me with this?" "You never gave me what mattered," I said, my voice trembling. "You gave me things. Not love." He stood, slow and deliberate, as if he could tower over the truth. "You think this child can love you the way I did?" "No," Liam said, rising now too, his eyes steady and unafraid. "I think I already do. It was chaos after that. Raised voices. Accusations. Richard demanding I leave, then demanding Liam leave, then threatening to cut him off. But none of it mattered, not to me. 'Cause I saw it in Liam's eyes, the way he looked at me while Richard roared and stomped and slammed doors. It was calm. Certain. Love that didn't budge, even in the storm. That night, I sat alone in my room, my heart breaking under the weight of it all. I knew what had to happen. Then my phone lit up. A single message from Liam. Tomorrow, 4 a.m. I'll be waiting for you downstairs. If you want this, really want this, come. Don't bring anything. Just you. I stared at it for a long time. The simplest words. The biggest choice. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't leave a note. I just slipped on jeans, a sweater, and stepped barefoot into shoes I hadn't worn in months. My hands trembled as I reached for the doorknob of the front door, but I didn't look back. Not once. And there he was. Liam. Standing beside his car in the driveway, the engine running low, the headlights dimmed. His hair was messy, his eyes tired, but he smiled when he saw me, like I was all he needed to believe the world still held something good. He opened the door without a word. And I got in. We drove until the city disappeared behind us, until the road became empty and the horizon stretched wide and golden. Neither of us spoke for a long time. There was nothing to say. Everything was already written between our hands, our glances, our breaths. We stopped at a motel miles from anywhere where no one knew our names. We paid in cash. We ate greasy diner food at sunrise and laughed like we weren't fugitives of propriety. And when we lay down that night, tangled in thin sheets in each other's warmth, I felt something I had never felt before. Not possession. Not performance. But peace. Real love, it turns out, doesn't care about rules. Or ages. Or names on property deeds. It only cares about truth. And the truth was this: Liam was the first person who ever loved me without owning me. Without needing to change me. In his eyes, I wasn't a wife or a prize or a mistake. I was Cassie. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. We didn't know where we were going. We didn't have a plan. But we had each other. And that night, under an unfamiliar sky, with his hand in mine, I whispered the one thing I had never dared say before. I'm free. And he smiled. We both are. They say fairy tales aren't real. That they crumble when the world comes knocking. But ours? Ours ran. Fast. Breathless. Unapologetic. And it didn't end at a castle or a grand ceremony. It ended where all real stories begin. With love. And freedom. And a door left open.